Israel will just go ahead with this offensive the way it sees it appropriate. They have said this publicly. Actually, Prime Minister Netanyahu said it on the day that Secretary Blinken, we were there on Friday, we will go alone if need be. So is the United States going to try to stop it if that would be the case?
We have not found them to be in violation of international humanitarian law, either when it comes to the conduct of the war or when it comes to the provision of humanitarian assistance.
If that's the case, what the hell is the point of the UN, or the UN Security Council?
Wait, I don't have any opening statements, so Mary, you want to start us?
Yeah, sure. So on Rafah, Matt, Israeli delegation is not coming here. How will the U.S. be able to present its alternative proposals to Israel since they're not going to be here this week?
So I saw the statement from the government of Israel. I would say it was a bit surprising and unfortunate. The UN Security Council resolution that passed today, from which the United States abstained, there were issues with which we had concerns related to that resolution. The fact that it did not condemn Hamas's terrorist attacks of October 7th. That's why we didn't vote for it. But the reason we didn't veto it is because there were also things in that resolution that were consistent with our long-term position. Most importantly, that there should be a ceasefire and that there should be a release of hostages, which is what we understood also to be the government of Israel's position. So it is a bit surprising and unfortunate that they're not going to apparently attend these meetings because, as you heard the secretary say in Tel Aviv on Friday after he met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other members of the Israeli government, we believe that, number one, a full-scale invasion of Rafah would be a mistake. It would be a mistake not just because of the civilian harm that it would cause, which would be immense. There are somewhere around 1.4 million people in Rafah now, and the government of Israel has not presented a credible plan to evacuate those people to other areas and take care of them once they were moved. But also, and this was, I think, an important thing that the secretary said, we also think that this type of invasion would weaken Israel's security. It would make Israel less safe, not more safe. It would undermine its standing in the world. So we are ready to present to them plans that we believe would achieve their legitimate goal, which is the defeat of Hamas, but would do so in a way that does not cause undue civilian harm and does not weaken Israel's overall security. So we will look forward to continuing to have those discussions with them.
But I mean, do you have a plan right now, like when that would happen? Would that be over the phone? Would Secretary Blinken go? Would you try to, and also, has there been any communication with the Israeli government at high level following this decision?
So a few things in order. So first of all, we started these discussions with them last week in Tel Aviv. As you know, the secretary discussed the potential invasion of Rafah with Prime Minister Netanyahu and the War Cabinet in Tel Aviv and laid out our very serious concerns. Defense Minister Gallant is here today. He'll be meeting with the secretary in a little over 2 hours, and I would expect that will be the subject of conversations in that meeting. And I understand he has a meeting with other officials in the government over the course of today and tomorrow. So we will have those discussions there. And then I am sure we will find other ways to make our concerns known to the government of Israel at very senior levels, but I don't have anything to announce with respect to that today. And then with respect to your final question, so we have had ongoing communications with officials from the Israeli government about this UN Security Council resolution going back multiple days, going back to last week. And we had talked about different versions. As you may recall, there was a different draft that was put forward first that called for a permanent ceasefire, which is not something that we supported. We want, as you know, want to see an immediate ceasefire, but linked to hostages, and then we want to build that into something more enduring. So we had been in close contact with them about this resolution. And as I said, we believe this resolution is consistent with our policy on this matter and consistent with what we believe to be the government of Israel's policy. So we have had conversations with them over the last 24 hours, and I'm sure those will continue.
Yeah, just a couple of other things. Just to be sure, so will Secretary discuss with Defense Minister Gallant the alternatives that United States was going to this and no.
That will not be the main. I am sure that it will come up to some extent, but we do not have a detailed presentation along those lines planned for this meeting today.
Okay, and I hope you don't call this a hypothetical. This is now very much a high possibility that everybody has the sense that whatever happens, regardless of you presenting alternative options or not, Israel will just go ahead with this offensive the way it sees it appropriate. They have said this publicly. Actually, Prime Minister Netanyahu said it on the day that Secretary Blinken, we were there on Friday, we will go alone if need be. So what is the United States going to try to stop it if that would be the case?
So I think I would answer that by saying we will make clear to them what the Secretary made clear on Friday, which is that we believe this type of full-scale invasion would be a mistake. It would be a mistake not just because of the extraordinary impact it would have on the somewhere around 1.4 million civilians who are in Rafah now, but it would also be a mistake because it would harm Israel's overall security. We think there is a better way to do it that would accomplish, as I said, what is a very legitimate national security goal of Israel's, which is to defeat the Hamas battalions that remain in Rafah. So we will continue to make that case to them. I expect that we will have other ways to do so over the coming days, but I would not want to make any predictions about what will come after that.
So,
Matt.
last week when you guys presented your resolution at the UN, there were complaints from people who said that it delinked the ceasefire from the release of hostages. And U.S. officials were rather vociferous in saying that that is not the case. However, what you guys abstained on today does appear to delink them. Is your understanding of?
So we don't believe it delinks them. You see in the same paragraph, the resolution calling for both a ceasefire and the release of hostages. It's not the exact language that we would have put forward, obviously, because the language that we would put forward is the language that we did put forward last week, but it is language that is consistent with our policy to call for both a ceasefire and the release of hostages, and that's why we did not exercise a veto today. As I said, we did have concerns about the lack of other provisions in the resolution, but as it pertains to a ceasefire and the release of hostages, both the things that we called for were there in the resolution.
The other provisions you're referring to, is there something more than just a condemnation of Hamas?
That is that is our
or were they plural?
That is our chief objection. I'll refer to the
okay,
UN
but the
ambassador
abstention
for
means that
any further.
you're okay with it. You're willing to go along with it, and so what do you expect now to happen as a result of the passage of this resolution?
So I think
Do you expect that Israel is going to announce a ceasefire?
I do not.
And that do you expect that Hamas is going to release hostages?
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that we have objected to for some time is that most of the people that call for a ceasefire, we believe, are calling for Israel to unilaterally stop operations and not calling for Hamas to agree to a ceasefire where they would release hostages.
Well, I think it goes both ways, doesn't it?
It could, but but the resolution today is a non-binding resolution. But
Okay,
we do
so what's
think,
the point?
Well,
Why did
you
you abstain? Why didn't you veto?
we didn't veto because we thought the language in it was consistent with something that the language as it relates to the ceasefire and release of hostage was consistent with the long-standing United States position.
So you don't believe anything is going to happen as a result of the passage of this resolution?
So I think that separate and apart from this resolution, we have active, ongoing negotiations to try to achieve what this resolution calls for, which is an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages. I don't know. I can't say that this resolution is going to have any impact on those negotiations. But those negotiations are ongoing. They've been ongoing over the weekend, and they've made progress.
So I don't expect you to answer this now, but to me, just stick this in your pocket. If that's the case, what the hell is the point of the UN, or the UN Security Council?
So we think it plays an important role.
It does, even though its action does absolutely nothing. And that you're going to get what you would like to see, not out of the UN, but out of discussions in Doha.
So we believe it's important that the UN speak and the UN Security Council speak on matters of international security. It's why we've been engaged in this process. It's why we thought we were going to have a successful vote on Friday that Russia and China unfortunately and quite cynically vetoed. But I do believe that ultimately, if we are able to achieve a ceasefire and the release of hostages is going to come not through a UN process, but through the process with which we've been engaged, yes, in Doha.
Thank you.
Just to put it in other words, I mean, do you expect, not just Israel, but Hamas, do you expect compliance with this resolution? You mentioned it's non-binding. Is it your expectation that Israel would actually, and Hamas for that matter, would actually say, okay, look, here's a ceasefire in the month of Ramadan?
So I don't think you're going to see Hamas complying with any United Nations Security Council resolution.
But do you want them to?
But I would say, as I said, it's a non-binding resolution, but we do believe that the ceasefire and release of hostages that the resolution calls for is not only the United States' position, but has been Israel's position. This is what Israel has been trying to achieve through these negotiations. So I would hope that we could get to that agreement through these negotiations, and I would hope we get that in the near future.
I mean, just to put it one more way, I mean, if the fighting continues, I mean, on both sides, is that, again, saying it's non-binding, but is that a violation of the Security Council?
Again, it's a non-binding resolution, and I would defer to international lawyers to speak in detail to that.
Can I go another aspect of Gaza, the issue of NSM 20? Could we discuss that in terms of what the communication has been so far with Israel? There's the deadline, of course, over the weekend. Has Israel presented assurances, if you want to call it that, and what's the U.S. response?
Yeah, so there was a deadline actually yesterday for us to receive assurances from all 7 countries, not just Israel, but all 7 countries to whom the United States provides defense articles and are in active conflict. There's a separate provision of the memo that provides a separate timeline. I think it's 6 months for countries to whom we provide defense articles but are not in active conflict. But for these 7 countries, which are Colombia, Iraq, Israel, Kenya, Nigeria, Somalia, and Ukraine, we have received written assurances that are required in the memo. In each case, these assurances were made by a credible high-level official in the partner government who has the ability and authority to make decisions and commitments about the issues at the heart of the assurances. And the next step, as provided in the National Security Memorandum, is that we will be compiling a report and issuing it to Congress by May 8th.
Okay, so so the credible assurances, I know you say not just Israel, but all of these countries involved. I mean, obviously there's a lot of interest in Israel in light of what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah.
So it's the understanding of the United States that what Israel's doing, it's credible in terms of their assurances about U.S. weapons.
Yeah, so first of all, I should be clear that these assurances are prospective, but of course our view on them is informed by our ongoing assessments of Israel's conduct in the war in Gaza. So we have had ongoing assessments about their compliance with international humanitarian law. I've spoke to them from this podium before. We have the CHERG process that is examining specific incidents. We have not found them to be in violation of international humanitarian law, either when it comes to the conduct of the war or when it comes to the provision of humanitarian assistance.